Kia ora koutou, ko Brent Barrett, toku ingoa. I work for Buff Miskel. I do pest control, mostly landscape scale strategies for delivery of PF 2050 funded projects or jobs for nature. But previously a research scientist in mostly in ornithology. I don't have 40 years of working history, but I have been walking upright for 40 years. So calling that a win so far, so good. Hopefully I haven't bitten off more than I can chew, and I hope to deliver even half of the statement that I've made. Question being, can we address these massive landscape changes and environments and habitat movements? This is not really a list of what I'm doing, but things that I want you to ponder. The likelihood is that I'm going to give you more questions than answers, and it's probably up to you to go away and ponder this for the next 40 years or so whilst walking upright, because the answer to technology and innovation will come from each and every one of us. Innovation is amazing because it is only as limited as your imagination. Technology has got to the point where we can cherry pick things that we require. So there's no reason why in your back garden you're not able to try little things and innovate as much as possible to understand these things better. And we'll get into that a little bit sooner. But the question obviously is, climate change is not fixed yet. I checked. I did a Google search. It's with us, it's hanging around. Younger generations, we're sorry. We're doing our best, this generation and previous generations. But it is an inevitable change in the landscape, and we are living in dynamic worlds. We are in a country that was degraded over many, many centuries of activity, deforestation, introductions of pest animals, weeds, etc. We know what it's like to be facing adversity. That's New Zealand's way of stepping up. So why can't we be leaders to the world in our innovation and ways that we resolve this? Questions about changes in pest animal numbers have been mentioned briefly in some of the previous talks. Yes, there will be changes in breeding success, food availability, seasonality, tolerance zones. Animals will be able to encounter environments that meet their tolerance expectations from their previous locations like Europe more easily and be able to move through this landscape less inhibited. So we'll need to be able to keep up with those changes in the landscape. Native species may benefit from changes in climate change. Some will definitely not. And we'll need to understand how we can meet this using innovation. And I hope that I can challenge your concept of innovation as this talk progresses and that I get to the end of it without rushing. This is what happens when you ask ChatGPT, what should I talk about in regards to river changes and riparian systems and braided systems in terms of climate change, and it nailed it. It's pretty good. I paraphrased. I didn't completely and utterly copy and paste, but we are going to look at much more varied and extreme weather conditions. We will no longer be able to predict what's going on out there to any reliability across an annual period. And the flow rates and stuff will change the deposition of soil transport through that system. We may end up with less of the alpine-derived soil, what would you call it? Sediments, I suppose, and we may get more introduction of erosion-based sediments, which are obviously more organic. That's going to change the benthic environments and change the availability of invertebrates and the survivorship of fish in that system, and adversely that will affect the braided river system birds. We'll also have changes in the predatory landscape, and we will have changes in the refugia of those predators. We've already seen evidence of rats being able to nest on not so hungry island of Tern Island. They're able to nest there, and there's not actually a lot of habitat available to them. What if the weeds are increasing, different species are colonising? We may increase the ability for predators to be successful in hunting our cryptic species. This is what happens when you do cut and paste from ChatGPT. This is a talk about innovation, so I'm allowed to use algorithms that are generated. And all I did is, and you'll know the text gets smaller when I've stolen the information. It's very big text. I wrote it myself, cut and paste. It's pretty small text. But I just highlighted that this really talks about us. We are the solution. I find it hard sometimes coming to BRaid because I as a highly optimistic human being, I get worn out, and I get not so much pessimistic, but worried. But when you see here, you see that the answer is community, science, data, all of the things we've been talking about today. What's driving massive pest control activity across the landscape? This looks very different to Colin's graph of, was it 1978 or something? Pest control activities are rampant. They've gone crazy. We're out there killing everything we can find, and to some incredible effect. We're probably creating some mesopredator release systems, no doubt. Some things that we won't understand for probably another decade. What are the impacts on cats in that landscape? What are the differences and changes in rats, abundance and movements? But we are putting a lot of effort in, and a lot of the cash injections that come from Doc's Job for Nature or PF 2050 funded activities, they're the lifeblood of getting this delivery and getting this information, and we're generating a lot of data from it. What's happened then? We've had more money to buy purchase traps and hardware. We're able to sort of support the riparian systems across the river and a lot of those tributaries that feed it. We can do landscape scale control, therefore there's not so much of a core protection effect, but actually a landscape approach. And then we're getting some education of various landowners and stakeholders about why we're doing this, and there's a larger buy-in as a result of higher action. But it takes effort. One of the things I do for a lot of projects is strategize their delivery over 3 years, or depending on their funding regimes. And it starts with demarcation, deciding on management units and locations, setting targets, and then I just stop and provide the advice, and they do the legwork and the hard yards, and it's immense. If every single one of those dots on that side there is a trap that's been successful in killing, they're pulling out 1,000 possums from that catchment. This is Autumn Bradley, Te Whara, just below Te Ahu Pātiki, the mountain that we bought as a collective whole. This effort has to continue and has to be perpetual, and we cannot continue to do this at this scale with the reduction in funding. We will need to turn to technology to aid us to be more effective and to use our labour more appropriately. If you don't have the text in the far corner there on the right, get it. If you need it, it's a really good resource. It's really well researched, and it covers a lot of the standard operating procedures. But we are lucky that we have a lot more knowledge in New Zealand about how to catch species, how to trap, how to understand the environment. And the surgence of appreciating or acknowledging Mātauranga Māori approaches is the future. And I'm really heartened by the delivery of that at school and high school level, and the potential that we have of taking this more traditional Māori approach to the values in the environment and better understanding ecology through those lenses. But don't forget about all the other old school trapping techniques that we developed as humans to collect fur and to make trade. Some of those old techniques are still relevant, and they still should be resurrected and used. Another thing that we need to think about as innovative is the devices that we use and the materials that we use. It surely is no accident that a cinder block has exactly the same aperture as the Doc 200. Because if you're putting something in a riverbed and a box floats away, what do you think the cinder blocks are going to do? And which of those two items are more natural in that environment, likely to be broken down by river systems, and therefore maybe net benefit and gain against the loss or impact on the environment will be different. So in my work, I try and challenge this idea of standardized methods, sticking to materials that have an undetermined life frame in the environment. I'm still pulling fen traps out of Fiordland. Trapped boxes look pretty good. Traps are still set, but they're fen traps. They shouldn't be there. So we need to address materials as an element of technology. But a lot of my job is looking at innovation, helping developers deliver, doing the field research for confirmation, and assisting in pen trials for NAWAC testing approval of these traps, and particularly looking at non-target risks and protecting our native fauna. Unfortunately, whilst technology is changing rapidly, and we seem to have more and more opportunities, The commercialisation process is extremely slow, and even slower for new novel toxins. Toxins take about 5 years to get to registration, all going smoothly, going through the process of EPA approval and MPI application. And if the toxin isn't performing well or starting to stutter and trip over, then the process is almost stalled, and we're looking at a decade. So innovation itself should be piggybacking off industry. You know, we should be using industries like LiDAR is used extensively for autonomic or vehicles that are self-driving. LiDAR has potential for us for monitoring animals and understanding the three-dimensional landscape. We should be starting to look at technology that's being driven by other industries, other people's money, that's pushing it out and dropping the price for its delivery. We also need to be really good at being effective and non-target, making sure that we keep our care and stuff safe. And I think that technology answers that problem. We also need to regulate private land use the way that DOC is trying to regulate trap use on dockland. So all of those things are very pertinent. I feel like I've jumped. No, I did not. What we are looking at now in today's landscape is that we have horizon expanding innovations. These are innovations that are taking the standard things that we use, say a lure device or a camera or a drone, and then looking at different ways of applying it. And just like ChatGPT, my mate who helped me write this talk, AI is going to be a future in understanding species signals from thermal cameras or a multispectral analysis looking at plants and weed infestations, as well as different ways of interacting with and using cameras to create a data set for your environment. What do I have? Can the device audit this landscape? And for engagement under the education side of things, when you can get something on a computer that responds to species coming through your device during the night, it's quite engaging, and people will stay up late at night looking at screens on their phones, and I believe that's quite a thing nowadays. And then there's mind-expanding innovations that take multiple components and kit-set them together. They tend to be very large, bulky items, but miniaturization will happen over time. But over time, we should have a situation where we have self-reporting live capture devices, even live capture devices that can differentiate between target species, self-luring, self-communicating. We'll have better quality self-resetting traps, kill traps that will only trigger on that particular organism or animal. We have an advantage in New Zealand when it comes to innovation. Our main thing we don't like is furry, and the things that we don't like, that we do like are feathery. So if we can get devices that can differentiate between a furry organism and a feathery organism, we're halfway to the problem being solved. And also more controlled toxin delivery systems, ways that we can deliver toxin in a measured dose, becoming much more palatable for environmental use in various stakeholders' land, where we know that we're not indiscriminately deploying toxin, but we're actually doing it in a way that's measured and controlled, so that we know the organism of target is getting a lethal dose the first time, and the next individual will come and have access to this yummy treat that will eventually kill them. One of the things that will never change is monitoring the effect or outcome monitoring, as well as understanding what is happening to your pest animals in that landscape. So whether your biodiversity is being improved, species recovery, survivorship of nests, etc., you need to monitor that outcome. A lot of that is labour intensive, especially in braided systems, as we know. But we also need to monitor the impact on the pest animals. Do we understand that this change in our trapping success, does it correlate to changes in density of animals in the landscape? You cannot use trapping success and results to indicate your success as an awesome kick-ass trapper in the environment when you can't prove that it's probably just that the trap stopped working or you changed the lure. While we look at expanding and understanding better how we can deliver the kill mechanism, we need to standardise and continue to standardise the monitoring mechanism. So we still need to go back to the old faithfuls to calibrate any new monitoring models that we start to use in the landscape, so we can understand what magnitude of change has occurred. And we also are in a situation where we can improve the luring capacities of our devices so that we can lower the labour costs of the device. Not necessarily important that you need to know that the trap is triggered. You may just double down on the number of traps that you have in that landscape to offset the labour that it takes to go and check and clear. That might save your project from having to go and buy communication devices that tell you what's happening because they're expensive. Wouldn't it be better to have more devices killing on the ground? That's in a single set scenario. Multi-set scenarios or self-resetting, it's a different story altogether. But in every single scenario, you need to lure that device. You need to bring those animals in. So do we have solid state plates? We are working on little sausage meats. This is obviously salami. I Googled cat setting sausage meat. It was terrible. I went for this cute cat here. Other devices that can mechanically deliver your lure over time. A lot of our multi-species lures go off in the environment, so we need to contain them in some way and reduce their oxidation. And another thing that I'm trying to address quite a lot is the sustainability of our actions. If we're talking about climate change and response, let's be proactive about reducing the impacts by reducing the effect of climate change by not changing it. And so this is a trap design, not 200 standard box per se, but it uses just one dimension of plank of wood. I don't know how many projects I get that ring me and say, Brent, we can't get the 250 plank. All we can do is this. And once you do take that single plank, you can see only 2 small pieces of wood are wasted in the process of producing this trap. Trap's smaller, lighter, uses less wood, and therefore is more sustainable in its delivery and actions. The other sustainability is by not visiting your trap so frequently, either self-resetting or self-luring or self-reporting, we're reducing that carbon footprint of that project. And the last thing is just broadening our net to understand how we can address these utterly disgusting, ugly, snarly little mean things in the environment that we're not doing a good job of controlling now. We know they have impacts. I know there's been a lot more work in the hedgehog industry, which is great, and a lot of toxins. But we just need to understand that the pressure on the developers, the industry, to produce these traps comes from the end user. If you're not asking and screaming for multi-mouse killing traps or very effective hedgehog killing traps or tiny little cute bunny killing traps, if you're not asking for them, they won't be made for you. There's no commercial viability in things that don't have demand. So think very hard about that as well. I didn't put questions at the end. I knew we weren't going to have any.